The land was cheap. Suspiciously cheap. That alone should have been enough to make them walk away. But for Michael and Thomas, two brothers bound by blood and shared dreams, it felt like fate knocking at their door. The ad appeared late one night, glowing on the dim screen of Michael's old laptop. A plot of land for sale. Outskirts of a forgotten town. No other bids. Final price, next to nothing. Michael stared at it, brows furrowed, cautious by nature. Thomas leaned over his shoulder, eyes blazing with restless excitement. "Look at it," he whispered. "No one else wants it. This could be our chance." Michael hesitated. Or it could be cursed. But Thomas grinned, wild and unshaken. Sometimes curses are just opportunities wearing a mask. They had spent their whole lives in a cramped industrial town, where the air smelled of coal and factory smoke. The streets were narrow and suffocating, lined with identical grey buildings leaning like weary old men. Even as children, they dreamed of escape. Wide fields, fresh air, a home they built with their own hands. Their father had been a builder, teaching them to shape wood and stone. Their mother had taught them values, patience, dignity, and quiet strength. But now, in their late 20s, those lessons felt like echoes in a cage. The town had become a prison. And this land, this strange, forgotten patch of earth, was the key. The bidding ended quickly. No competition. No last-minute offers. Just one final click, and suddenly the land was theirs. They sat in stunned silence, staring at the confirmation screen. Michael felt a knot of anxiety twist in his stomach. Thomas laughed like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. "Brother," he said, "we are free." Spring came, soft and bright. They loaded their old pickup with tools, food, and dreams, then drove for hours. The further they went, the more the world changed. The factories faded into rolling fields and open sky. The air grew clean, carrying the scent of grass and new life. For the first time in years, they breathed deeply. Finally, the road narrowed into a dirt path that wound through wild, overgrown fields. The truck rattled and shook as weeds scraped against its sides. Then, beyond a cluster of trees, the land appeared. At first sight, Michael's heart sank. The place looked abandoned for decades. Tall grass swallowed broken fence posts. Thorn bushes tangled together like barbed wire. The soil was rough, cracked and lifeless in places. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the whisper of the wind. And then they saw it. In the far corner of the property, half hidden beneath wild growth, stood a shed. Or rather, what was left of one. Its roof sagged. The boards were blackened with rot, clinging together out of sheer stubbornness. It wasn't listed in the auction documents. It wasn't supposed to be there. The brothers froze. Michael's breath caught. Thomas's pulse quickened. Something about the sight of it felt wrong, out of place. They approached slowly. The air around the shed smelled of damp wood and mold. As they drew closer, they noticed the door. It wasn't just closed. It was chained shut, a massive rusted padlock sealing it tight. Michael frowned. Why would anyone lock up a place like this? Thomas stepped forward, eyes gleaming with reckless curiosity. Only one way to find out. The wind hissed through the grass, carrying their unspoken question into the stillness. What secret was worth locking away for all these years? The morning sun cut through the mist, casting pale gold over the field. The shed stood in the distance, silent and defiant, as if daring them to approach again. Thomas didn't wait. He strode forward, boots crunching against the frost-hardened ground, a grin flashing across his face. "Today," he said, "we open it." Michael followed slowly, his arms crossed, unease etched in every line of his face. "This could be dangerous," he warned. "The roof looks ready to collapse. There could be animals in there. Snakes. Or worse." Thomas shot him a sharp look over his shoulder. "Or there could be answers. You really want to walk away now?" Michael didn't reply. The silence between them was answer enough. Up close, the lock was even more menacing. The chain was thick, its iron links eaten away by rust but still impossibly strong. The padlock was fused with age, as if it had been there longer than either of them had been alive. Michael reached out and touched it. The cold metal stung his fingertips. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "Everything else on this property is falling apart, wide open to the elements. Why seal this place up like a tomb?" Thomas scanned the ground, searching for something to use. Half buried beneath weeds, he found a length of corroded metal pipe. Perfect. Michael caught his arm. Think for a second. Someone locked it for a reason. Thomas yanked free with a smirk. Exactly. And I want to know why. He wedged the pipe into the lock and pushed with all his strength. The chain rattled violently. The shed shuddered, groaning like a wounded animal. Michael winced, glancing over his shoulder as if the noise might summon something from the woods. Stop, he hissed. You'll break the door. Thomas gritted his teeth. Good. With one final heave, the rusted lock gave way with a screech of protest, snapping open. The chain slithered to the ground in a heavy coil. For a moment, neither of them moved. The broken lock lay at their feet, a silent warning ignored. Then Thomas gripped the warped handle and pulled. The door resisted, sticking to the frame with years of damp decay. He yanked harder. With a groan that sent a shiver up Michael's spine, the door swung wide. A rush of stale, heavy air escaped, carrying the sharp scent of mildew and rot. Inside, shadows clung to the corners like living things. Sunlight filtered through the broken roof, slicing the darkness into jagged beams. Michael lifted a flashlight from his pack, its beam cutting across the gloom. Shapes emerged. Broken furniture piled against the walls. Rusty tools scattered on the dirt floor. Jars filled with cloudy, unidentifiable liquids, their labels long dissolved. The place looked less like a shed and more like a graveyard of forgotten things. Creepy, Thomas muttered, stepping inside. His boots sank into the soft, damp earth. Cobwebs clung to his arms like strands of old silk. Don't touch anything, Michael said sharply, staying near the doorway. But Thomas was already moving deeper. And then he saw it. At the far end of the shed, unlike the chaos around it, stood a stack of wooden boxes. They were carefully arranged, almost reverently, as if someone had placed them there with intention. The wood was dark, warped by time, but still sturdy. Some boxes were bound with rusted metal locks, though most had long since failed. One box near the top sat slightly ajar, its lid tilted open just enough to tease. Thomas's breath quickened. Hey, Michael, he whispered, excitement cutting through his voice. Come look at this. Reluctantly, Michael stepped inside, his flashlight trembling as he scanned the walls. The beam landed on the stack, and his eyes widened. This doesn't fit. Why would anyone store this here? Only one way to know. Together, they crouched beside the box with the open lid. Michael's hands trembled as he slowly lifted it. The hinges creaked like old bones. Inside lay a bundle of photographs, their black and white images faded but visible. A man, a woman, 2 children standing stiffly in front of a grandhouse. The man's expression was stern, his posture commanding. The woman, graceful but serious, rested a protective hand on the children's shoulders. They lived here, Michael whispered. This was their land. Beneath the photographs were rolled papers, fragile with age. When they unrolled one carefully, a blueprint spread across the dirt floor, its lines precise and meticulous. Walls, rooms, staircases. At the corner of the page, a strange symbol caught their attention, an upside-down triangle with the letters CR inside. Thomas frowned. What do you think it means? Michael shook his head, unsettled. I don't know. But this. He gestured to the photos, the blueprint, the carefully stacked boxes. This wasn't just a farm. They exchanged a look, excitement mixed with unease. Whatever story this land held, it was only beginning to reveal itself. The room was small and dimly lit, a single lamp casting shadows across the walls. On the table between them lay the old box they had carried back from the shed, its contents spread out like pieces of a puzzle. Michael turned one of the photographs over in his hands. The image was faded, the faces blurred by time, but the family's posture was unmistakable, proud, solemn, purposeful. The man stood tall in a dark suit. The woman, dignified yet gentle, held her children close. Behind them, the house loomed large, its clean lines and sturdy frame speaking of wealth and craftsmanship. But now that house was gone, swallowed by decades of neglect. Thomas paced, restless energy crackling in every step. This isn't random junk, he said, running a hand through his hair. Somebody locked that shed up for a reason. And I want to know what it is. Michael nodded slowly. It's not just the photos. It's this. He tapped the rolled-up blueprint with one finger. The strange upside-down triangle with the letters CR stared back at them like an unblinking eye. It feels like a signature, or a warning. Beneath the stack of papers, almost forgotten, lay a leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked, the leather peeling like old skin. When Michael touched it, a puff of dust rose into the air, carrying the scent of ink and time. "This looks like a diary," Michael murmured, voice low, reverent. He opened the brittle pages carefully. The ink had faded to brown, but the handwriting remained elegant, deliberate. At the top of the first page was a name: Jonathan Grayson. The brothers leaned closer, their shoulders nearly touching as they read the opening lines. "This land was my father's before me. Now it is mine. I will build upon it, protect it, and ensure it endures." Thomas's brow furrowed. "So this is the guy. The original owner." Michael nodded. "Not just an owner," he said quietly. "A builder. A protector." The first entries painted a picture of life on the farm a century ago. Jonathan wrote of clearing the fields, planting crops, and raising animals. He described his wife, Elizabeth, and their 2 children, Henry and Clara, with tenderness that softened his otherwise stern tone. But as the pages turned, the mood shifted. Jonathan's words grew tense, urgent. He wrote of changes in the world beyond his farm. Whispers of war, economic collapse, people turning desperate. "I lie awake at night," one entry read, "listening to the wind rattle the boards of our home. I fear it is not the wind alone I will one day hear. The world is unraveling, and I must act before it reaches us." Michael's fingers tightened around the fragile pages. He wasn't just a farmer, he said, almost to himself. He was scared. He saw something coming. Thomas leaned in, his voice a whisper. "Scared of what?" The answer came in the next passage. Jonathan described his plan to dig beneath the land, to create a hidden refuge where his family could survive any disaster. Not just a cellar, but a network of rooms with stone walls and timber supports. He listed supplies: food, water, tools, and books. "The body must be fed," Jonathan wrote, "but so must the mind. Knowledge is the seed of survival." Thomas's eyes gleamed with excitement. "He built something underground," he said. "Like a bunker. A secret fortress." Michael's stomach churned. "Or a tomb," he murmured. The idea was thrilling and terrifying all at once. Jonathan hadn't just prepared for hardship. He had been obsessed with it, methodical in his secrecy. The shed, they realized, had been a disguise, a simple wooden building to hide the true entrance beneath. As they read deeper into the diary, symbols began to appear in the margins. Small sketches, arrows, and, over, the same mark they had seen on the blueprint, the CR triangle. Sometimes it stood alone. Other times, it appeared next to passages about secrecy, inheritance, and duty. Thomas frowned. "This CR thing is everywhere. It has to mean something." Michael's mind raced. Maybe it's a person. Or a group. Someone who helped him. Or someone he was hiding from, Thomas suggested darkly. Neither answer felt complete. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, their eyes burned from reading. The diary had given them a glimpse into Jonathan Grayson's mind. A man driven by fear, love, and an unshakable desire to protect his family at any cost. Michael closed the fragile book carefully, setting it on the table with a trembling hand. "He built it," he whispered. "It's out there. Still waiting." Thomas's pulse raced. "Then we have to find it." Michael hesitated. What if it's dangerous? What if it collapsed years ago? Thomas stared at him, his jaw set. Or what if it's still intact? What if everything he left behind is still down there, right under our feet? They exchanged a look, a silent agreement, and a silent challenge. Tomorrow, they would return to the shed. Tomorrow, they would search for the entrance Jonathan had hidden so carefully. Somewhere beneath that cold, silent earth, the past was waiting to be unearthed. The morning was crisp, the air sharp with the scent of dew and wet grass. Michael and Thomas stood side by side, staring at the sagging shed that loomed like a sentinel. Its broken roof cast jagged shadows across the ground. Beneath their boots, the soil felt cold and unyielding, as if guarding what lay beneath. Thomas gripped his shovel, his knuckles white with anticipation. "This is it," he said, his voice vibrating with excitement. "Today we find the entrance." Michael's jaw tightened. "We have to be careful." Jonathan built this to last. If we dig recklessly, we could destroy whatever's down there, or bury ourselves with it. Thomas smirked. Caution doesn't uncover secrets. Then he jammed the shovel into the earth, ignoring his brother's worried glance. They started behind the shed, focusing on the area Jonathan's diary had described. At first, it was just dirt and tangled roots. Sweat dripped down their backs as they worked, the sun rising higher, burning away the morning chill. Hours passed. Blisters bloomed on their hands. The air filled with the rhythmic sound of metal striking earth. But there was nothing. Frustration boiled over. Thomas threw his shovel to the ground. This is pointless. We've been at it for hours, and there's nothing here. Michael wiped his brow, breathing hard. Jonathan hid this place well. If it were easy to find, someone would have discovered it decades ago. But doubt crept into Michael's voice, and Thomas caught it. Maybe there's nothing to find, Thomas snapped. Maybe we are chasing a ghost. The silence that followed was heavier than the heat pressing down on them. Then Michael's gaze fell to the open diary lying on a nearby rock. He crouched, scanning the last page they'd marked. His eyes narrowed. "Wait," he whispered. "We've been digging in the wrong place." Jonathan's words were precise, but in their exhaustion, they had misread them. He hadn't written beneath the shed. He'd written behind it. Michael's heart thudded. "It's not under the shed at all. It's just beyond it. We need to move." Thomas's frustration melted into adrenaline. "Then let's go." They hacked through the dense brush behind the structure, their machetes slicing through branches. The smell of sap and damp leaves filled the air. Finally, the thicket gave way to a small clearing, the ground beneath their feet softer, looser. Thomas stomped his boot down. The sound wasn't the solid thud of compact earth. It was hollow. His head snapped toward Michael. "You hear that?" Michael nodded, his pulse racing. "This is it." Fueled by excitement, they dug furiously. Each thrust of the shovel sent dirt flying. The earth here seemed different, darker, as though it had once been disturbed. Then, with a dull thunk, Thomas's shovel struck something hard. They dropped to their knees, scraping with their hands, clawing at the soil until a wooden surface emerged. It was rectangular, thick planks bound together with rusted iron hinges. Moss clung to its edges like a living seal. A hatch. Thomas let out a shaky laugh. "It's real. He actually built it." Michael's breath caught. Or someone else did. Together, they heaved against the hatch. At first, it didn't move, as if the earth itself was resisting them. Then, with a deep, groaning creak, it gave way. A rush of stale, cold air spilled upward, carrying the smell of rot and stone. Beneath them, darkness yawned open, a black mouth leading into the earth. A ladder descended into the void, its wooden rungs damp and slimy with age. Thomas tested the first rung. It held. He grinned, wild and fearless. Only one way to find out what's down there. Michael's throat tightened. "Think about this. We don't know how deep it goes, or what condition it's in." Thomas swung his lantern over his shoulder. "If we don't go now, someone else will. This is our discovery." One step at a time, they descended into the dark. The ladder groaned under their weight, every creak magnified in the silence. The smell grew stronger the deeper they went. Damp earth, mildew, and something metallic, like rusted iron. Their lanterns flickered, casting erratic shadows on stone walls that glistened with moisture. Finally, their boots touched solid ground. The space opened before them like a secret world. The chamber was massive, its walls carved from stone and reinforced with timber beams. Dust lay thick, undisturbed for decades. Michael turned slowly, his breath catching. Jonathan, he really did it. They moved deeper, their lantern light revealing more details. Shelves lined one wall, sagging beneath the weight of glass jars clouded with age. Wooden crates were stacked neatly in the corners. A circle of chairs sat in the center, as if waiting for occupants who had simply stepped away. The silence was absolute. It felt like a time capsule, frozen at the very moment it had been sealed. Then Michael's light caught something on the far wall. A large painting, covered by a heavy cloth. He approached cautiously and tugged it free. Dust billowed into the air, making him cough. When it cleared, both brothers froze. The portrait showed Jonathan Grayson, his wife Elizabeth, and their children Henry and Clara. The family stood proud and somber, And behind them, painted into the background, was the same upside-down triangle with CR inside it. Thomas's voice cracked with awe. It's their symbol. Their mark. Michael's gaze drifted lower, to a small wooden box half buried in the dust beneath the painting. He knelt and opened it. Inside was a delicate iron key and a folded letter sealed with wax, cracked and fragile with age. Michael read the faded words aloud. To he who finds this place, you now hold not only the weight of my family's work, but its promise. Guard it well. Use it wisely. For what lies below was built not for me, but for those yet to come. The brothers stared at each other, the weight of the message sinking in. The key trembled in Michael's hand. Somewhere in this hidden refuge, something even greater waited to be unlocked. The chamber was silent. The only sound was the brothers' breathing, fast, shallow, uneven. The key rested in Michael's trembling hand, its iron teeth catching the lantern light. Thomas's eyes were wide, wild with excitement. This is it, he whispered. Whatever Jonathan hid, this key opens it. Michael swallowed hard, his throat dry. And whatever's locked away has been waiting for decades. His voice was reverent, almost fearful. Jonathan didn't just build a refuge. He built a legacy. They scanned the room, lantern beams sweeping across shelves, crates, and shadows. At the far corner, half hidden under dust and cobwebs, stood a large chest unlike the others. It was beautiful, even in decay. Iron bands reinforced the heavy wood. Intricate carvings of wheat stalks and vines ran along the edges. At its center, the same upside-down triangle with CR was etched deep into the surface. A perfect match for the key. Thomas dropped to his knees before it. "Help me," he urged. "Come on, Michael. Let's open it." Michael hesitated, staring at the chest as though it might bite. What if it's dangerous? His voice was quiet, almost lost in the still air. What if Jonathan locked it away for a reason? Thomas glanced up sharply. What if it's the reason we are here? The moment stretched. Then Michael knelt beside his brother. He slid the key into the lock. It turned with a deep, echoing click. The chest groaned as they lifted the heavy lid together. The hinges screeched like something long asleep awakening. Inside, the lantern light glinted off piles of gold and silver coins, their edges dulled but unmistakably valuable. Small sacks lay among them, spilling jewels that sparkled even in the dim glow. And beneath the treasure were ancient documents, sealed with cracked wax, deeds to land, ownership papers, and records of wealth stretching back generations. Thomas gasped, his breath coming fast and sharp. "Michael, we are rich." His voice trembled with disbelief and hunger. "Do you know what this means? We could leave everything behind. We could buy anything. Go anywhere." Michael stared, silent. The sight was overwhelming, yes, but his thoughts weren't on mansions or riches. His mind was on the diary. On Jonathan's trembling words written in faded ink. This was built not for me, but for those yet to come. "This isn't just treasure," Michael said finally, his voice steady but firm. "It's a test." Thomas blinked. "A test?" "No. It's ours. We found it." "No," Michael countered. "Jonathan built all of this to save his family, his community. Look around you, Thomas. The books, the food, the tools. He was trying to preserve life, not hoard wealth." Thomas rose to his feet, fists clenched. "Easy for you to say when we've been broke our whole lives. We've worked in soot and smoke, scraping by while everyone else had more. Don't you want freedom? Don't you want to live?" Michael's gaze didn't waver. "I do. But this." He gestured to the chest, to the portrait watching over them from the wall. "This isn't just about us. If we take it all for ourselves, we destroy what Jonathan built." The argument boiled over in the flickering light. Thomas's voice rose, sharp with anger and desperation. Michael stayed calm but firm, like a stone in a storm. Finally, breathless and trembling, Thomas turned toward the portrait. Jonathan's painted eyes seemed to bore into him, stern yet pleading. Elizabeth stood beside him, Henry and Clara at their feet, a family that had once lived and dreamed just as they did now. Thomas's shoulders slumped. He closed his eyes and whispered, "What if he's right? What if this is bigger than us?" Days passed as they wrestled with the decision. They walked the fields, pacing the boundaries of their land. They watched the sun rise and set over the wild grass, imagining what it could become. And slowly, a plan took shape. The treasure would not be spent on luxury. It would rebuild the land, restore it, transform it into something that could give life again, not just to them, but to everyone who came after. The work began immediately. The overgrown fields were cleared, rotting fences torn down and replaced. The soil, once hard and lifeless, was ploughed and seeded. The old shed was dismantled plank by plank. In its place, they built a hall, sturdy and open, with wide windows to let in sunlight. Where secrecy had once reigned, there would now be community. Word spread. Families came from the nearby town, first curious, then eager to help. Men who had lost their jobs found purpose in the fields. Women taught children to read using books rescued from Jonathan's underground chamber. The laughter of children filled the hall, echoing off the wooden beams like music. The underground refuge was preserved, not as a hiding place, but as a museum of memory. Visitors were brought below to see the circle of chairs, the shelves of books, the portrait of Jonathan and his family. They heard the story of a man who had prepared for the worst, and in doing so, had created something that would inspire generations. The CR symbol remained a mystery. Some thought it stood for a secret organization, others for a family motto. But over time, it came to represent resilience and renewal, a mark of hope rather than fear. Seasons passed. The once forgotten land flourished. Golden wheat swayed in the breeze. Orchards blossomed each spring. Children ran barefoot through fields that had been barren for decades. On one autumn evening, as the sky burned orange and red, Michael and Thomas stood side by side, gazing over what they had built. The hall glowed warmly behind them, filled with voices and laughter. Thomas's voice was quiet. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd just taken the treasure and run?" Michael smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But then I see this, and I know we made the right choice." The true treasure wasn't the gold or jewels lying in a chest beneath the earth. It wasn't the deeds or the wealth Jonathan had preserved. The real treasure was life itself, the community they had rebuilt, the future they had secured. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the land seemed to hum with vitality, as if Jonathan's spirit still walked among the fields. Michael glanced at his brother and said, "We didn't just inherit land. We inherited a purpose." Thomas nodded, his voice steady now. "And we'll protect it, the way Jonathan once did." Above them, the stars emerged, silent witnesses to a legacy reborn. The land that had once been silent and abandoned now thrived, carrying forward a promise made long ago. A promise that the brothers had finally fulfilled.